Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about competency questions and how to prepare and answer for them. So this is part of our interview series that we did. Now, previously, we talked about motivational questions, the kind of first half of the behavioral questions that you can be expected to answer in a finance or consulting interview, and we talked about what are the different types, how do you prepare for it, what are the kind of motivational questions that you'll be asked, and how do you structure answers. I recommend, if you haven't done so already, please have a look at that section because it goes into quite a lot of depth around how to prepare for kind of interview questions holistically. So firstly, let's talk about, what are competency questions, and then very importantly, how do you spot them? So competency questions are really testing whether you share the same values of the company, or whether you can explain, your previous actions, the way you solved your problems, and then kind of give examples of how you did that. And Francis, I've always had a little bit of trouble in just spotting where I'm supposed to go into, like, that competency question answering mode, because there's a very specific way to answering these questions. How have you gone about it?
I think the best thing for me is to kind of look at the company's website, make sure that you know exactly what it is that they're looking for, and also the priority that they're placing on each kind of area and value that they're saying is important. Because then you know that those are the kind of questions that they're going to ask. They often kind of have a checkbox approach to these questions. Then you know that even sprinkling in those characteristics into your answers is going to come across really well. And it just allows you to kind of focus in on specific areas rather than, like you said, approach a blank white page and kind of think there are a limited number of competencies. How do I know which ones to select for?
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that we always advise our mentees to do is to really, like, when you're in the interview situation, to really try and pay attention to if this is a competency question that you're being asked, because they're not going to say, hey, we're going to do competency questions now. Tell me about a time when, give me an example when. So, Francis, I know we were discussing earlier, like, there is a pretty fine balance, right, between having kind of chit chat and then understanding when it's time to answer this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things is that often interviewers try and make you feel comfortable and relaxed and have an informal setting, which is great because it helps you kind of be yourself and bring out your personality. But don't kind of be too deceived. Like, every question is an opportunity for you to kind of show how much you can structure your thoughts and how impressive your achievements are. So use every interaction as an opportunity to kind of use these frameworks and put forward these examples and stuff. Often they'll kind of prod you a bit more if you haven't done so, but don't kind of let it get to that stage.
Yeah, for sure. And so, if someone starts their question with this, any one of these, tell me about time and giving me an example of when, you know that your brain should be in competency question mode, which is by using what they very commonly know as the STAR framework. This is essentially how you're supposed to be structuring your answer. Um, like we say in most of our videos, a lot of the basics of the of this we expect you to kind of know already because it's out there on Google. So what we're going to be talking about is the things that Google doesn't tell you that often. So let's apply to the STAR framework. So first S is the situation. You're here to give the context. And then what people don't do enough is stress why this is important, because if someone is talking about anything that they did, it's very easy for an interviewer to just completely dismiss that out of hand. Let's say, oh well, I was building some things in a village somewhere. That's not nearly as impressive as, well, I was building wells in um, particular desertified part of Uganda, where immediately your you're able to show why this was important. So, do big up yourself because no one else is going to do it for you. T is the task, or what needed to be done. What was the challenge? Like, what was going wrong? A good way to kind of show this is always to kind of to end this with, otherwise X negative outcome would have happened. And then the action is around, what did you actually do in order to remedy this problem or solve that problem? And you want to mention no more than two things that you did, because you want to maximize for the simplicity factor rather than the accuracy. Look, there might have been 10 things that you did. Just pick the most important two things for the sake of a smooth story. And then the last one, or is talking about the consequences of your actions. Do put it into numbers and figures. They don't have to be perfectly accurate. Maybe you increased well capacity by 30%. They're not going to send forensic investigators after you to show that you actually increased it only by 29.5%. And also, for consulting consulting interviews where they do tend to go a little bit deeper. So Francis, you mentioned that that it's recommended you add on another R, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously STAR is such a great framework and should always be applied. The one thing I often found that was taught to me is that automatically putting in an extra R at the end, which is reflection, just shows that extra level of kind of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, like understanding of kind of how you've interacted in a situation and what you could have done better. So the R could be something like, the result might have been great, and hopefully the result is great in your story, but the process could have been better if I'd done this, or if I'd realized this before. It also might just be kind of a reflection on the whole situation. So perhaps you've worked in a certain type of team with certain types of people, and you kind of reflect and say, in the future now, I'm going to go away and always know that these two personalities are going to clash. I need to know to do this to kind of resolve that conflict and ensure that the team kind of works functionally. So adding in that extra R kind of probably preempts the next question that they might even ask you. And if not, will just be really impressive and show great self-awareness.
Nice. And hopefully, guys, you can see from our answer here that we're kind of going above the kind of bog standard YouTube/Google material, because ultimately, look, we want you to be able to answer the question, but also not only that, shine in your answer. And the same rules as the last time apply in the previous video about interview questions, which is answer it in around 2 minutes, because I can assure you you will take a little bit longer to do it on the day. List no more than 3 reasons. I always think no more than two, but between 2 and 3, definitely no more. And do be prepared to sacrifice a bit of accuracy for simplicity. Only the most important details to answering the question are really necessary. And like we said before, do reference a very specific story or an achievement, because you can't just go into a bit of a dribble around, oh, well, if this happens and that, then I do this. You can't get into that weird scenario analysis tree. That's just not how you answer competency questions. And give evidence to back that up. Do focus on the challenge, because I always say you have to imagine that the interviewer knows nothing about your challenge, which is actually quite a hard thing to do. So if someone was to say to me, hey Donwy, I climbed K2, I'd be like, what the hell is it? What the hell is it? Okay, I kind of don't care. But if they said, well, I climbed K2, which is the highest peak on Earth, and around 10% of people who try and climb it, if they can, end up dying, I'd be like, wow, okay, that is impressive. A specific story that I have when I was mentoring one of my mentees was that, they were working at a smoothie place. I thought, okay, well, that kind of seems non-applicable. But then when I dug a little bit further, boom, turns out it was actually one of the highest grossing smoothie joints in all of New Zealand, and with just one piece of evidence that just completely flips the dynamics of that story. So do reference on that challenge. And this is something I used to have, issues with, which is don't repeat the same story for different questions, especially if it's for the same interview. For different interviewers, fine. It's actually a more efficient way of preparing for these questions. And do sell yourself, because no one else is going to do it for you, and also they're not going to send forensic investigators after you, like we said before. Cool. Now let's just go through a couple of common competency questions where hopefully we can do just a little bit of myth busting and prepare you for answering these with a bit of finesse. So, classic one, what's been your biggest achievement to date? What a lot of people have difficulty with is thinking that they need to really impress the interviewer. And I always had that niggling feeling, oh, whatever I'm going to say, they're going to think like, that's not really a big deal. But actually, like we said before, it's actually about showing the mental process that you took in order to achieve what you did. So it's about talking through something that's difficult or important or complex that you did. It could be from anything from sports, academics, extracurricular, or charities. Any kind of experiences there will do. I just kind of tell people to stay away from anything familial. It can give off a little bit too much of a unprofessional vibe. I mean, that's just me. Anything else to add from your side, Francis?
No, I think that sounds great. I think that making sure that you kind of don't give anything that makes the interviewer feel uncomfortable, something that feels professional, something that kind of gives off, a really good impression of you, and that is kind of sufficiently impressive to be your biggest achievement to date as well. It's probably quite important.
Yeah, and the star framework that's used is a very classic one that can be classic one compared to what we talked about previously. The thing that most people skimp out on is just talking about the context. Sorry, the first S, the situation. Do paint the context and explain either the challenge or the stakes, because that is how you show that this was something important, difficult, or complex. Essentially, that's how you answer that question. And then the last bit as well is around quantifying the results. Do talk about how your actions contributed to solving the problem or moving yourself forward, or maybe it prevented like something disastrous from happening. The second one is a question that we get asked about quite frequently because it can be a little bit difficult to talk about, to answer. And it's around, tell me about a time when you handled conflict with a colleague. And ultimately, this is one of the times when the concept of hidden questions comes in again. What the interviewer wants you to talk about is about how you made the effort to understand the motivations of different stakeholders and use that to move the situation forward. So it's about showing that you didn't just butt heads with someone because, they were their motivations at the face of it weren't in line with yours. You kind of try to find some points of reconciliation, or just understand just at a deeper level why someone was doing that in order to move the situation forward. So what I always recommend here is actually using a kind of shortened framework where you talk about the situation. What was your goal? Who made your life difficult? How? And the task, you can kind of skip it. You can kind of skip this, and then just go straight in action, and talk about how you understood their underlying motivations and what you did in order to get around it. I would say do have a look online for examples of these kind of questions, but always remember to answer that hidden question, which is about showing you that you understood the different motivations and then how you moved the situation forward. So Francis, here you talked about a kind of classic mistake that a lot of people can fall into in answering this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think often when it comes to interviews, you're so desperate to show off how right you are or how well you've done. And it's really easy with this question to focus on explaining why you were right and the other person was wrong, and using that as perhaps a tactic to change someone's mind. When actually, I think what the interviewer is looking for is if you're in a team together and you're right and they are wrong, how are you going to interact on a personal level? Kind of what are you going to do to convince someone in a positive way and kind of encourage them that this is the right decision and get them on board rather than bulldoze them and prove that you've got kind of the right way to handle the situation, or you're right and they're wrong. And so kind of having that extra level of emotional intelligence and again self-reflection, not really focusing on what the actual problem was, but more how you thought about what their motivations were and how you thought about handling it, is kind of much more important in the end for the interview.
Excellent. Um, and that takes us to the end of our interview section. So thank you very much, guys, for coming with us on this journey. And as part of the IYP Application Academy that we're running this year, we hope that you come along to our live lectures where we talk about these kind of questions in far more detail with like live Q&A and live run-throughs of potential answers to give to these questions. And otherwise, we hope that you have a successful application season this year.